I remember the day like it was yesterday, even though it's been 5 years since everything changed. I was working my usual shift in the Deep Space Communications Array on Mars Station Beta, monitoring the quantum channels for any anomalous signals. Most days were mind-numbingly boring, just routine check-ins from mining operations in the belt and automated cargo vessels making their runs between the colonies. But that day was different. I just finished my 3rd cup of synthetic coffee when the first harmonics started appearing on my screens. At first, I thought it was just another glitch in the system. We got those sometimes when solar flares interfered with the more sensitive equipment. But this was different. The signal came in waves, like nothing I'd ever seen before. It wasn't using any of our standard protocols or encryption methods. Instead, it seemed to be modulating itself across multiple quantum frequencies simultaneously, almost like it was trying to maximize its chances of being noticed. I ran it through our translation matrices, but they couldn't make heads or tails of it. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The signal wasn't coming from any known human installation or vessel. According to my instruments, it was emanating from somewhere deep in the Carina Nebula, over 7,000 light-years away. I immediately notified my supervisor, Dr. Sarah Chen. She was skeptical at first, we all were. First contact protocols had been gathering dust for decades, and most of us thought they were more of a bureaucratic exercise than anything we'd ever actually need. But as she studied the data, I saw her expression change from dismissive to concerned to absolutely thunderstruck. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the numbers again. "The energy required to transmit a quantum signal across this distance, it's astronomical. No known human technology could achieve this." We spent the next 12 hours analyzing every aspect of the signal. More specialists were called in, and soon our modest monitoring station was crawling with the brightest minds in xenocommunications. That's when we made the second breakthrough. Hidden within the quantum harmonics was a compressed data packet. It took our best quantum computers 3 days to decrypt it. When we finally managed to render the contents, what we found was both beautiful and terrifying. The message began with a series of mathematical sequences, prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, and other universal constants. But what followed was a desperate plea for help. The message was from a species calling themselves the Arxur. Their civilization was ancient and peaceful, having achieved technological advancement we could barely comprehend. But they were under attack by something they called the Void Hunters, a hostile force that was systematically destroying their worlds. The most chilling part? The Arxur had sent this message as a last resort. They had observed our species from afar and noted our unique characteristics, our ability to survive in what they considered death world conditions, our remarkable adaptability, and our capacity for both violence and compassion. In their desperate hour, they had chosen to reach out to us, the humans they had long watched but never contacted, because they believed we might be their only hope. The decision to declassify this information to the public wasn't made lightly. There were heated debates in the Security Council, emergency sessions of Parliament, and countless hours of expert testimony. But in the end, we couldn't ignore their plea. The signal contained enough advanced scientific knowledge to prove their technological superiority, and the threat they described was too dire to ignore. That's when humanity did something unprecedented: we united. Old rivalries were set aside, resources were pooled, and the Deathworlder Fleet project was initiated. Using the technical specifications included in the Arxur message, we began constructing ships unlike anything we'd ever built before. I sometimes wonder if we made the right choice, preparing for a war that was light years away against an enemy we'd never seen. But then I remember the desperation in that message, the mathematical elegance with which it was constructed, and the trust they placed in us by reaching out. We might be a young species, but we understand one thing very well: sometimes, standing by and doing nothing is the greatest evil of all. Little did we know that this was just the beginning of our journey. The real challenges, and the true test of humanity's resolve, were still to come. The construction of the Deathworlder Fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. I transferred from communications to the project's documentation division. Someone needed to record this for posterity, and I'd been there from the start. The Arxur's technical specifications were revolutionary. Their quantum drives didn't just bend space, they folded it in ways our physicists had only theorized about in their wildest dreams. The antimatter containment systems they designed made our best efforts look like children's toys. But what really set their technology apart was how it interfaced with human biology. You see, the Arxur had noticed something unique about us, our neural plasticity. Where their species required extensive cybernetic augmentation to pilot their vessels, our brains could naturally form the necessary connections. They designed their ship specifically for us, knowing we could handle the neural load that had driven their own pilots to madness. The first prototype was built in lunar orbit. We called her the Prometheus. It seemed fitting, stealing fire from the gods again. When Captain Maya Rodriguez first interfaced with the ship's neural network, we all held our breath. The medical team was convinced the feedback would overwhelm her consciousness. Instead, she laughed. "It's like learning to walk again," she said, "but this time with 1,000 legs, and each one can touch the stars." Not everything went smoothly, of course. The third prototype, Hyperion, imploded when its quantum core destabilized. We lost 15 good people that day. Their names were the first to be carved into what would become the memorial wall. They wouldn't be the last. But for every setback, there were breakthroughs. The neural interface technology led to unprecedented advances in medical science. The quantum engineering principles revolutionized our understanding of physics. We were evolving, not just technologically, but as a species. The most difficult part was keeping the project secret from the general public, at least initially. How do you hide the construction of a fleet that makes aircraft carriers look like rowboats? The answer came from an unexpected source: social media. We flooded the networks with conspiracy theories about the project, each more outlandish than the last. When the truth finally came out, it was just another theory in the noise. Until it wasn't. I remember the day we launched the first battle group. 5 ships, each nearly 2 kilometers long, their quantum-forged hulls gleaming in the sunlight. The Prometheus, now our flagship, led the formation. Watching them rise from lunar orbit, their drives warping the very fabric of space around them, I finally understood why the Arxur had chosen us. We weren't just building ships, we were building hope. Every rivet, every circuit, every line of code was a promise to a civilization we'd never met. A promise that humanity, for all its flaws and fractious nature, would answer their call. The neural integration process changed the pilots in ways we hadn't expected. They started having dreams, vivid visions of distant worlds and ancient cities. Some believed they were connecting to the collective memory of the Arxur, embedded somehow in the ship's systems. Others thought it was just their brains trying to process the vast amounts of information flooding through the neural interface. Either way, it added another layer of mystery to an already impossible situation. As we prepared for our journey into the unknown, I couldn't help but think about that first signal I'd received. How strange that the fate of an ancient civilization would come to rest on the shoulders of a species that had barely taken its first steps into space. But maybe that was our strength. We were too young to know what was impossible, too stubborn to accept defeat, and too determined to let another species face extinction alone. The Deathworlder Fleet was more than just a military force, it was humanity's statement to the universe. We were stepping onto the galactic stage not as conquerors or victims, but as protectors. Whether we were ready for that role or not, we would soon find out. The quantum jump to the Carina Nebula took 3 months objective time. I was aboard the Prometheus, documenting everything. The neural interfaces made conventional measurements almost meaningless. We existed in a state between normal space and somewhere else entirely. The pilots called it the deep, this strange realm where thought and reality blurred together. Our first real contact with the Arxur wasn't what anyone expected. We emerged from quantum space near their homeworld, or what was left of it. The planet was there, but its surface was scarred with impact craters visible from orbit. The once mighty civilization had been reduced to scattered settlements in underground bunkers and orbital habitats. The Arxur themselves were beautiful, in an alien way. Bioluminescent creatures with crystalline structures growing from their bodies like natural armor. They communicated through patterns of light and color as much as sound. When they saw our fleet, their entire species lit up in a wave of blue-green hope that was visible from space. Their leader, whose name translated roughly to "last light before dawn," met with us in one of their few remaining orbital stations. The neural interfaces our pilots used were based on Arxur technology, which made communication surprisingly easy. What they told us chilled everyone to the bone. The Void Hunters weren't just another alien species, they were something far worse. They existed partially outside our dimension, making them nearly impossible to detect until it was too late. They didn't want resources or territory, they fed on consciousness itself, draining sentient beings of their awareness and leaving empty husks behind. The Arxur had fought them for centuries, but their peaceful nature had left them ill-prepared for a war of extinction. They had technology far beyond ours, but lacked the aggressive instincts needed to use it effectively in combat. That's why they'd called us. Their studies of Earth had shown them a species that understood warfare on a fundamental level. We learned that we weren't their first choice. They'd reached out to other species first, but none had responded. Some had already fallen to the Void Hunters, others were too afraid to help. Humanity, the youngest spacefaring race they'd contacted, was the only one that answered. The neural interfaces revealed something else. The Arxur collective memory was real. Every member of their species shared a telepathic bond, preserving their history and knowledge across generations. When they died, their memories joined this collective consciousness. But the Void Hunters didn't just kill their victims, they erased them completely from this shared memory. Billions of years of experience and wisdom, gone in an instant. Our first battle came sooner than expected. A Void Hunter scout force detected our arrival and attacked the orbital station during the diplomatic meeting. That's when we discovered why the Arxur had been so specific in their ship designs. The neural interfaces didn't just let us control the ships, they let us perceive the Void Hunters' dimensional shifts. Captain Rodriguez, linked with Prometheus's systems, saw them first. "Contact," she screamed through the neural net. Multiple bogies, shifting between dimensions. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human military history. Our ships moved in ways that should have been impossible, guided by human instinct enhanced by Arxur technology. We lost the Hyperion II that day, but we took down 3 Void Hunter vessels. The Arxur were stunned, they'd never seen their own ships used so effectively. Last light before dawn's color patterns shifted to a deep purple of reverence when she observed our battle recordings. "You understand," she transmitted, her bioluminescence pulsing with emotion. "Your species knows that sometimes survival requires destruction." We had forgotten this truth. That first battle changed everything. We weren't just fighting to save another species anymore, we were fighting to preserve consciousness itself. The Void Hunters weren't just threatening the Arxur, they were threatening the very concept of memory and experience. If they won, they wouldn't just kill us, they would erase every trace that we had ever existed. The war was just beginning, and we had much to learn. But watching human and Arxur crews working together, combining our aggression with their technology, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Maybe this was why we had evolved on a death world. Maybe humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our intelligence, but our stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds. 6 months into the war, we learned the true cost of fighting dimensional horrors. The Void Hunters launched a massive assault on the Arxur's largest remaining colony in the Carina Nebula. We lost 3 ships and nearly 4,000 personnel, but what haunts me most are the screams through the neural net when consciousness after consciousness winked out of existence. The neural interfaces changed us all. Humans aren't naturally telepathic, but prolonged exposure to the Arxur technology awakened something in our minds. We started experiencing echoes of the Arxur collective memory. At first it was just the pilots, but soon even support crew like me began having the dreams. Beautiful cities of crystal and light, scientific discoveries that spanned millennia, and an understanding of the universe that made our physics look like cave paintings. But we also felt their pain. Their losses. The horror of watching entire worlds go dark as the Void Hunters fed. It drove some of our crew mad. We had to establish a new psychiatric division specifically for memory shock cases. The Arxur helped where they could, teaching us meditation techniques developed over millions of years to handle the weight of collective consciousness. The turning point came when Captain Rodriguez discovered something in the shared memories, an ancient Arxur weapon, abandoned because they considered it too horrible to use. It was called the consciousness bomb, designed to weaponize the very thing the Void Hunters fed upon. The Arxur had built a prototype but sealed it away, unwilling to employ something that could theoretically erase awareness across an entire dimension. The debate over whether to use it split both our forces. The Arxur were horrified at the idea of becoming what they fought against. Many humans argued that survival justified any means. The tension nearly fractured our alliance until a young Arxur scientist named Dances with Starlight proposed a modification. Instead of erasing consciousness, we could use the device to anchor it. Make it impossible for the Void Hunters to consume awareness within its range. It would require an enormous power source and someone to guide it, someone whose mind could bridge the gap between human tactical thinking and Arxur technological understanding. Rodriguez volunteered. She'd been the first to successfully interface with our ships, and her mind had adapted to the Arxur collective consciousness better than anyone else's. The modified bomb was installed aboard the Prometheus, and we prepared for what we hoped would be our last battle. The Void Hunters must have sensed our intentions. They launched an all-out assault on the remaining Arxur strongholds. The space around the Carina Nebula lit up with dimensional rifts as their entire fleet emerged. Our sensors counted over 300 ships, more than we'd ever seen in one place. What followed was chaos incarnate. Ships phasing in and out of reality, quantum weapons tearing holes in spacetime, and through it all, the constant background noise of consciousness being consumed. We lost the Damascus and the Thor in the first hour. The Hiroshima went down protecting an Arxur civilian transport. But we held the line. When the bomb was ready, Rodriguez sent one last message through the neural net, "See you on the other side of consciousness." Then she activated the device. The blast wasn't visible in any conventional sense, but every sentient being in the system felt it. It was like a wave of pure awareness, anchoring every consciousness it touched to our reality. The Void Hunters' reaction was immediate and terrifying. Unable to shift between dimensions or consume consciousness within the blast radius, they found themselves trapped in normal space, fighting opponents who had spent generations practicing the art of physical warfare. What followed wasn't really a battle, it was a slaughter. But victory came at a price. The energy required to maintain the consciousness anchor burned out the Prometheus's quantum core. As the ship began to break apart, Rodriguez maintained the field, holding the Void Hunters in place until the last of their vessels could be destroyed. The final transmission from her neural interface was a burst of pure emotion, not fear or regret, but a fierce joy in knowing her sacrifice meant something. We found her body in the wreckage, neural interfaces still humming with residual energy. But according to the Arxur, something unprecedented had happened. Her consciousness hadn't been destroyed or even transferred to their collective memory. It had become something else entirely. Something new. The aftermath of the Battle of Carina changed both our species forever. Rodriguez hadn't died in any conventional sense, her consciousness had evolved. The Arxur discovered traces of her awareness scattered throughout their collective memory, but also in the neural interfaces of every ship in the fleet. She had become something new, a bridge between human and Arxur consciousness. The Void Hunters were defeated, but not extinct. Our sensors occasionally detect dimensional anomalies that might be their scout ships, lurking at the edges of known space. But they fear us now. The species they thought would be easy prey had become their nightmare, the Deathworlders who turned consciousness itself into a weapon. The Arxur began to change too. Contact with human minds through the neural interfaces awakened something long dormant in their species, a capacity for controlled aggression, tempered by wisdom. Meanwhile, humanity gained access to millions of years of accumulated knowledge, accelerating our development in ways we're still trying to understand. We established permanent bases in the Carina Nebula to help rebuild Arxur civilization. The technology that made the consciousness anchor possible led to breakthroughs in dimensional physics. We learned to shield worlds from dimensional incursions, ensuring the Void Hunters could never again feed on sentient beings within protected space. The memorial wall on Mars Station Beta now stretches for almost a kilometer. 27,000 names, human and Arxur alike, marked with a simple phrase in both our languages, they preserved consciousness. But it's not just a monument to the dead. Every few days, someone reports feeling Rodriguez's presence through the neural interfaces, especially during moments of crisis or discovery. She's become a guardian of sorts, watching over both our species. Last week, we detected another signal, similar to the original Arxur SOS. It came from the Andromeda Galaxy, another ancient species facing extinction at the hands of something they don't understand. The Security Council spent less than an hour deliberating before issuing their response. The Deathworlder Fleet is being reactivated. New ships are under construction, incorporating everything we learned from the Void Hunter War. But this time, we're not going alone. Arxur volunteers have already begun training as crew members, eager to repay the debt they feel they owe humanity. Together, we're stronger than either species alone. Sometimes at night, I still dream of that first signal I received on my monitoring station. One simple message that changed the course of two civilizations. The Arxur chose to reach out to us because they saw something in humanity that we hadn't yet recognized in ourselves, the perfect balance of compassion and courage, of wisdom and warfare. We're no longer just the inhabitants of a death world. We've become something more, protectors of consciousness itself. And somewhere out there, in the quantum fields between dimensions, Captain Rodriguez is watching, ready to guide the next generation of Deathworlders to whatever challenges await us among the stars. The original SOS message is still broadcast automatically from Mars Station Beta every 12 hours, carried on the same frequencies we first detected 5 years ago. But now it's accompanied by a response, a promise to any species that might be listening: you are not alone. The Deathworlder Fleet stands ready. I've been asked to command the documentation division for the new expedition. As I pack up my quarters on Mars, I can't help but smile at how far we've come. We were a young species, barely united, when we first heard the Arxur's call for help. Now we're the ones answering that call for others. That's the thing about being a Deathworlder, we don't just survive, we adapt. We take the worst the universe can throw at us and turn it into strength. The Void Hunters taught us that consciousness is precious. The Arxur showed us that wisdom comes in many forms. And together, we learned that the true measure of a civilization isn't its age or its technology, but its willingness to stand up for others. Tomorrow, we head out again, into the unknown. There are more battles to fight, more civilizations to protect, more mysteries to unravel. But this time, we go with the combined strength of two species who have looked into the void and refused to blink. We go as guardians of consciousness, as protectors of memory, as the fleet that death itself could not defeat. The Deathworlder Fleet sails again. And somewhere in the quantum fields, Rodriguez is smiling.